everybody. It's Dave here and Darren over there. I know you can't see it, but he's got tear lines down his face for what happened this morning when the great Team USA defeated Team Canada for the gold medal in hockey. Yes, it must be good. So today we're going to start off with the NFL kicks off the combine this week. Yeah, this week. Vikings offseason is heating up big time with aging veterans on defense featured like Harrison Smith. There's question marks on whether he'll come back or not. Javon, Hargrave, Jonathan Allen, Eric Wilson, all in excess of 30 years old. The big question remains, will Brian Flores lean finally into the 2026 draft and get younger? We've got 4 picks in the top 100, including a comp round third rounder that will add to that total. And the defense needs a fresh talent to replace the old guard because the old guard can't last forever. We'll break down the linebackers rooms, Dallas Turner's explosive rise, the edge trio of Greenard, Van Ginkel, and even Eric Wilson's future in the middle, and the depth worries that Darren and I both have. Plus, combine buzz. Why no podium for KOC and Rob Brzezinski? We'll get it. We'll try to answer those questions for you. QB rumors still swirling. And then we'll end up with our tribute to Rondale Moore. All that on this Two Old Bloggers with Darren and Dave on next. Let's rock! Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikingsland with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. Hey there, Darren, buddy. How you doing today?
I've been better.
You've been better. It just goes to prove U.S. is better at hockey than communists.
They're better the past couple of years. That is now, they've won 2 of the last 3 World Junior Championships. They won the men's World Hockey Championships last year, which are always held overseas. And now they won Olympic gold, as well as the women won Olympic gold, and they won the World Championship last year as well. So U.S. is on a roll in the international scene hockey-wise, and congrats to them. Fantastic game. I was not happy with the result. You were. Just about everybody else on this chat will be, all that cares about hockey will also be very happy about it. But again, great game, and Heidelberg played a hell of a game there today. Save he made with his stick, with Taves has got a wide open net there. That's unbelievable. And very unfortunate from my end of things. That may have not have held up as the winning goal because there was still about 10 minutes left or something when that made that save. But still, tremendous game. Again, congrats to the men's on the win, their first gold medal since the Miracle on Ice.
And it's always good to see, especially after following the women earlier this week when they beat the women's club from Canada as well.
In overtime as well.
It was. So today we're going to talk about the need for youth on the defense. And we'll get it started with Theme 1.
Theme 1.
Getting younger.
Well, hopefully. I want to get into this just because since Brian Flores he joined the Vikings in 2023, and I think just about every Vikings fan would agree that he's done a fantastic job as our defensive coordinator during that time, Dave. I think, though, that but during that time, since he's been here since 2023 as our defensive coordinator, he's really leaned on veterans to play in that defense and has used very few young players to play major roles on the team, either as starters or playing a significant amount of snaps. Really, the only guy that has done that has been Dallas Turner recently. Ivan Pace a little bit as well. But you look at also the Vikings draft-wise, they have not really drafted a lot of young, promising talent during his time at the Vikings since 2023. And players that the draftees, and usually it's in the top 100, those are the guys that you would expect to be players, prospects who have the best chance of playing a significant role on a defense right away, whether it's be a starter or a rotational guy. Well, the only Vikings defensive player that's been drafted in that time in the top 100 has been Dallas Turner, who was picked number 17 overall in the 2024 draft. Other than that, that hasn't been the case. And despite that, though, the Vikings have a very effective defense under Brian Flores, particularly in 2024 and in 2025. Last year, the Vikings defense was very effective, struggled a little bit early in the season, but they certainly got it together midway through the season and were lights out late in the season. But that defense was pretty old. You mentioned the guys, Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, Andrew Van Ginkel, Harrison Smith, Eric Wilson, all of those guys are 30 years or older. And then Blake Cashman, our starting inside linebacker, along with Eric Wilson, he isn't far behind them. He's 29 now. He's going to turn 30 in May. So that's a pretty long in the tooth defense. And it's time that the Vikings, they really need to start finding some young, promising talent. They're going to need that to replace some of those veterans maybe as soon as 2026. When you look at Harrison Smith potentially retiring, Eric Wilson is a free agent. We don't know what Javon Hargrave's future with the team is going to be because of his salary cap ramifications with him playing next year with the Vikings under the contract he has, and the fact that he's 33. So the Vikings need some fresh blood in there, some young blood. But the problem has been that the talent on the defensive side with the depth side, there aren't a whole lot of young guys, really promising guys that have shown that they're ready to, assume a larger role in the Brian Flores defense, whether it's be a starter or as a rotational guy playing a lot of heavy snaps. Dallas Turner has really been the only guy who's done that. Levi Drake Rodriguez maybe somewhere along the line, but really Turner is the guy, which, makes you wonder, is 2026 this offseason going to be the year that Brian Flores, and we think that he's going to have a large role and large say in the personnel that gets brought in and the draftees that get picked on the defensive side this offseason? Is this going to be the year that Brian Flores starts turning over that roster and start targeting young guys that potentially could have a big impact on the Vikings and play a large role in that defense next season and in 2027, when perhaps Andrew Van Ginkel is going to be shown the door, Jonathan Allen is going to be shown the door, those kinds of guys. The Vikings have to get younger there. I think that 2026, the draft, that we are going to see that infusion of youth, and I could see the Vikings going very defense heavy, particularly in the top 100. And there's a few reasons for that. One is, like I mentioned, the defense is old. It needs young blood. Van Ginkel, Hargrave, Allen. We don't expect Hitman will be back. Eric Wilson, will he be back or not? That's still to be determined. He's a free agent. We'll talk about him a little bit later. But it is old, and they really, again, they need to bring in some young talent, cheap talent, to supplement the older guys, as this roster in a year or two is going to look a lot different on the defensive side of the ball because of the age of some of the guys that I've mentioned. So that's one reason why I think 2026, they've got to start looking at drafting defensive players in the draft and drafting them early in the draft. Another reason why I think that that's going to be the case is because if you look on the offensive side of the ball, Dave, that the offensive side, we're pretty set starters wise. And we're pretty set as far as those guys being young or in their athletic prime amongst the starters there. Brian O'Neill is the only projected starter right now on the offense who would be at least 30 years of age starting next season. Yes, we do have two other 30-plus guys, Ryan Kelly, the center, and Aaron Jones Sr., who are over 30, and the Vikings are going to have to replace them because we think both of those guys will not be back next year. They'll be cut. But I'm not really – the Vikings, I'm not convinced that they're going to look at the 2026 draft and the top 100 to replace those guys that early in the draft. We'll see about that, but I don't think they're going to look to the draft to replace both of them. And I think that free agency might be where they look to find some replacements for those two guys as opposed to the draft, but certainly not both going to the draft. I think a third reason why the Vikings could go heavy defense early on is unlike from in 2023, 2024, and 2025, we have a lot more top picks in the top 100 than we've had the previous 3 years. From 2023 to 2025, which is when Brian Flores has been with the Vikings, we've only had 4 picks in the top 100. That's the fewest in the NFC North. I think it might be the fewest in the NFL. This draft alone, we have 4 picks right now in the top 100. And so that gives the Vikings a lot. Yeah, that gives, including you talked about the comp pick. So, the Vikings are going to have more bites at the apple early on for those prime players who could come in immediately and be expected to compete for starter roles or to, play again, 400, 500, 600 snaps as a rookie. So that really helps a lot. So those are 3 reasons why I think that defensively, I think that this is the year where Flores is going to pound the table, and we're going to see the Vikings go defense heavy early on in the draft and on day 1 and day 2. I could see 3 of those 4 being defense right off the bat. So those are the reasons why. One of the criticisms, a small criticism of Brian Flores since he's been with the Vikings has been his reliance on veterans. And some people have wondered, he doesn't seem to be developing young guys. He doesn't seem to trust young guys. I don't buy that argument, Dave. I don't know if you do either. I don't buy it because when you look at the young players that have the Vikings have gotten rid of since Brian Flores came to the Vikings, whether it's Louis Cine, Brian Asamoah, Caleb Evans, Mekhi Blackman, like none of those guys have done anything at their new stops. And I think Louis Cine is currently out of football altogether. So, the thing with Brian Flores with the young guys is most of the young guys, Jake Roy is another guy that comes to mind. When those guys were duds, they weren't really good players. So I don't think it was a case of Brian Flores not being able to develop them. They just weren't as good as maybe the Vikings had hoped they would be. They didn't develop, and they moved on from them quickly, and rightfully so. I think that, again, Flores is a guy that I don't think he's a guy who favors vets and all of that and just doesn't trust rookies and gives up on them too quickly. I think that he'll play you if he can get the job done, and evidence of that would be when he was in Miami. His 3 years as a head coach in Miami, if you look at his defenses, particularly in 2019, his first season as head coach there, and in 2020 when they went 10-6 with the Dolphins, those defenses were pretty young, very young actually, and they included lots of guys as starters on the defense who were either rookies or were in their second year in the league, in some cases their third year in the league, including Andrew Van Ginkel. So again, Brian Flores, if you can get the job done, he'll play you. It doesn't matter whether you're a 10-year vet or you're a rookie. But the problem has been that he just has not had young guys who could really handle things at the NFL level. And that's why a lot of them are no longer playing for the Vikings and aren't playing much for the teams that they are currently with either. So, this year, with the amount of picks we have in the top 100, Dave, where we could really target some guys that could make an impact on the defensive side of the ball and could step in there and maybe not be starters right away, but at least play a significant role on the defense. This could be, I mean, this is the year for Brian Flores to show that he's ready to, that, he can embrace young guys and he can give them a role on the defense and a significant role on the defense. They've got the picks in the top 100. They may be able to get more if they trade down a little bit in a couple of cases. And we'll see how that process goes. But I do think the 2026 draft, you're going to see the Vikings go pretty heavy on the defensive side of the ball early in the draft on day 1 and day 2, which they have not done the previous 3 drafts with Flores here, largely because they have not had very many picks in the top 100. It's basically been the first round, and then they're waiting until the late in the 3rd round to pick.
Right.
Because of trades that they've made mostly, which resulted in them bringing in people like TJ Hawkinson and that. But this year, right now, unless we trade them away, a couple of them away for draft capital for like Mac Jones or Derek Carr or something like that to get that new quarterback in the organization, we are set up to again have a lot of bites at the apple in the top 100 and go after some defensive players that Brian Flores really, really likes and thinks can have a big impact on this defense in 2026.
I agree with you. Now, Mr. Nelson wrote a little bit ago, sorry I'm coming into this late, but what are the positions do you think they should draft and who and what? And Mr. Nelson, we've been going over every position group on the team as a review. We're going over linebackers today. We went over defensive linemen last week. In those, Darren highlights draftable players that the Vikings could target and could or should target. So just be patient and it'll come out. Well, next week, I think we're doing defensive backs or something like that.
Yes, we will be.
And you'll find those on that end as well. But there's a handful of each that could be targeted. So.
Yeah, for sure. We'll get into it in next session. But I think early on, from what I've been reading, Dave, you can also please chime in. But it seems like a lot of these mock drafts, which aren't based in reality, let's be honest, but they are people inside the Vikings organization. But I'm seeing a lot of safety, a lot of corner going in the 1st round, 2nd round, and that's not too far-fetched to believe that the Vikings would do that, because we know, particularly on safety side of things, safety is a huge, huge position in Brian Flores' defense with the Vikings these 3 years. He really uses 3 safeties on the field a lot, and I feel like it's been very successful. I don't see why he would change from that. So I think that in this draft, 1st or 2nd round, if there's a really good safety that Flores likes, he very well could be a Viking. The kid from Toledo has been mentioned, McNeil Warren or something like that, a hyphenated name. Yeah, the kid from Dylan Thieneman from Oregon, Caleb Downs has been the obvious one, but I think he'll probably go earlier than 18. But those are some names. Those are some names that have been mocked to the Vikings repeatedly that I have seen in the past month.
And those are. I'm not satisfied. I haven't looked too much, but Thieneman does not sound good to me. But anyways, we will find out. And Mr. Nelson says, don't tease. We're going to get into it. Linebackers right now on theme 2. Oops.
Yeah.
There we go.
We're
If
moving
I hit the right button, there we go. Linebackers.
Yeah. We're onto our 2nd unit. Well, actually 2 units. I'm combining both linebacker units here. As we get closer to free agency, I want us to go through all the units before we get to free agency. So today we're going to do outside linebacker or edge rusher, whatever you want to call them, as well as the inside linebacker today. And this is our state of that position, those positions, and who we think is going to stay, who's going to go, who might be some draft prospects the Vikings might look at. And for the outside linebacker, inside linebacker positions, Dave, I feel like, right now there's, as far as starters go, there's not a lot of mystery here. Right now, I think that we've got 3 really good edge outside linebackers who are going to play a ton in 2026. Blake Cashman is set in stone to be one of your starting inside linebackers. The Vikings do have one big decision to make at inside linebacker, which we're going to get at. And also, like you mentioned in the intro, they've got to figure out some of the depth issues at both of these positions, because there is not a whole lot of it there as far as I'm concerned. But first, the good news, and I'm going to get to the outside linebackers first, is that, again, Andrew Van Ginkel, Jonathan Greenard, Dallas Turner, real good 1-2-3 punch there at outside linebacker for the Vikings. And Dallas Turner last year, particularly his play in the second half of the season, was one of the big highlights of a down year for the Vikings, and the way he emerged and started to show some of the potential that made him the number 17 overall pick in 2024. He led the team in sacks with 8 sacks, had 42 quarterback pressures. I think that's PFF's stats. He had a PFF grade of 70.2, which is pretty good, and that mark was much lower at the beginning of the year than it ended up being at the end. So he really came on at the end of the year, very encouraging, and we hope the arrow is pointing up on this guy. And of course his snap count jumped considerably too. I think he played about 400 more defensive snaps than he had as a rookie. Jonathan Greenard and Andrew Van Ginkel were productive when they played, even though Greenard's sack totals were way, way down. But they got hit with the injury bug. Van Ginkel was out a significant amount of games at the start of the year, and then Greenard missed a bunch of games at the end of the year. That gave Dallas Turner an opportunity. He was played in both positions, in the Van Ginkel position and then in the Greenard position later in the year. I think what we found when we saw that was that Dallas Turner was much more effective and comfortable playing the Greenard pure pass rusher edge linebacker role than he was the Van Ginkel role, where Van Ginkel drops into coverage a lot more. And so I think that's the best use of Dallas Turner, even though he can be good in coverage at times. But I think get him going after the quarterback, that's what he does best, and that's what he was doing best at the end of the year. I think the thing with the Vikings, and one thing Brian Flores is going to have to figure out, is how can he find a way to get all three of them on the field at the same time, but also keep them, and also he wasn't able to do that much past season because, again, Van Ginkel was hurt a lot early in the season, and then Greenard missed a lot of games late in the season. Hopefully they'll all be healthy for most of next year. And again, Flores will need to find a way, if he can get all three of them on the field at the same time, to see if that works. If they from a run defense perspective as well as a pass rush perspective. I think he's also got to figure out a way how to rotate divvy up their snaps in a way that keeps them fresh, but also allows them to play enough that they have the maximum impact that they can have as players. And that's going to be a challenge because Van Ginkel has played, he played over 900 defensive snaps in 2024. He wasn't close to that this year because he missed 4 or 5 games to start the season, but his rate of play when he did play was he was playing 95 to 100% of the defensive snaps later on in the year. So we'll see what Flores does with that, but that's a nice problem to have, I think, because I think this is a very nice 1-2-3 punch at the outside linebacker position the Vikings have. The concern that I think I have with this is that who's the number 4 guy here in case the injury bug hits Turner or Van Ginkel or Greenard again, or in some cases, maybe, God forbid, two of those 3 are hurt and are out a significant amount of time. If that were to happen in 2026, Dave, I don't know who the Vikings would have as to come in to be the guy to play significant amount of snaps for those. When you look at the guys on the bench, Bo Richter, Chaz Chambliss, Gabe Murphy, Tyler Batty would also be thrown in there, I guess. None of those guys really played much at all defensive snaps last year. Brian Flores had no interest in using them other than for defensive snaps. They were mostly special teams guys. So, I don't have much faith that any of those guys can emerge to be a number 4 guy like Pat Jones was in 2024. Back then, they had Pat Jones. They also had Jihad Ward, who was an edge, listed as an edge, but he played more inside. But in either case, they had those two guys who had played edge at the NFL level, and they were pretty quality depth. I think they don't have that right now, and the Vikings are going to have to figure out how to do that. And they're going to have to bring that in either because I'm not confident about what we have on the roster right now. They're going to have to either bring it in through free agency or the draft. The good news on free agency, Dave, is I think that this year's edge rushing crop is pretty good, and I think pretty deep. Overall, there's some big names out there, like Khalil Mack is scheduled to be a free agent. Joey Bosa is scheduled to be a free agent. Jalen Phillips could be a free agent with the Eagles. There's a few other names as well. I don't think the Vikings are going to be in on those guys. They're going to be pretty costly. But I think what the Vikings are looking for is, because you've got the big three who are going to play a lot, you're looking for a younger veteran who could be willing to take a secondary role as a rotational edge rusher for not a huge ton of money. That does narrow the field down quite a bit, because most people who are going to free agency, they want more money than they were making, and they want more playing time than they currently had. So it's going to be a tricky needle for the Vikings to thread to find the right one. One guy that would interest me, and the Vikings would know him well, would be Kingsley Enagbare from the Green Bay Packers, pictured here. He played 41% of the defensive snaps last year for the Packers, was not a starter, but, pretty quality depth, not a superstar. He had a couple of sacks, and not a guy who you'd want to view as a long-term starter, but I think he's a pretty good rotational guy, and he's still young at 26. There could be some upside there. I don't think he's going to be hugely expensive because of his production in the past. Would he come to Minnesota to be a rotational guy? Hard to say. You might watch out for Miami because his old defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley, is now the head coach there. Maybe that's where he goes for a bigger opportunity, but he'd be a guy that interests me out of that kind of mid-tier, second tier amongst edge rushers who are set to be free agents. Another guy potentially that might be of interest, even though he's been defensive end most of his career, Yetur Gross-Matos, who played with the 49ers the last 2 years. The Vikings have, since Kevin O'Connell became the head coach here, they've liked to take shots at early round draft picks, usually first rounders, who have been basically busts, but they've taken flyers on them, whether it was, Jalen Naylor or Sam Darnold, right? Gross-Matos was a second round pick from Carolina. He hasn't had the career that some thought he was going to have, but he has had 4 to 5 sacks in different seasons at Carolina or with the 49ers. He's a guy who could be potentially I don't know how he would fit as an edge rusher, but Danielle Hunter did it for one season at least. And he's a guy that could do the Gerard Ward thing, I think, and you could put him inside because he's been a defensive end in the past. He had 4 sacks 2 seasons ago at the 49ers. He only played 14.6% of the defensive snaps last year for the 49ers. He had some injury woes. He's a guy I think that's going to be not get a lot of interest on the free agency market, but he has some talent, and he probably would be not very expensive and would give you some veteran depth who also isn't going to be expecting to be playing a shit ton. And I think that's going to be important too. Somebody who would be a low risk, low cost veteran depth add for the Vikings if they're interested. As far as the draft
phase 2 or phase 3 of free agency.
He'd likely be a phase 2 guy, maybe even a phase 3, depending on his market. If people have concerns about his health, his medicals, we don't know how that's going right now, but he did have some injury issues last year with the 49ers. But he's still not that old himself. He's just 28 years old. The draft wise, there's a lot of promising guys out there. The most promising, David Bailey, he's Texas Tech. Then you got Cassius Howell. Those are the two big ones. Again, I don't think the Vikings, they're going to go early, probably before 18. I don't think the Vikings are going to be in on them, especially when you've got Jonathan Greenard, who you hope will be around another couple of seasons at least. Van Ginkel, the way he plays, you'd be hoping he's around as long as he can play. Mm-hmm. And Turner is a young guy who seems to be only getting better, and you've got big things for him. So I don't know if the Vikings are going to be in on one of the top edge rushers early, even if they're It will depend. If David Bailey is there at 18, he'd be kind of tough to pass up, but we'll see. But I think what we're more likely to see is the Vikings add a veteran in free agency, but also because of the depth that they have, the young depth isn't too super good. I think rounds 5, 6, and 7, the Vikings have 5 picks there right now too. I think that might be potentially where they take a flyer on an edge guy who has some promise. They're probably looking for somebody with like one really good trait, whether it's get off the snap, wingspan, twitchy athleticism, something like that they think that they can work with and develop. Who's not going
long arms.
Yeah. One of those things, and they think they can work with and develop them. They're not expecting that guy to come in and play very much at all as a rookie, just do special teams and see if 2 or 3 years down the road, when Van Ginkel is no longer with you, or maybe Greenard is no longer with you, this guy develops. I think that's what you're looking at. Who that could be, there's a bunch of prospects who are slated to be picked on day 3. Again, we want to pay attention to the players that the Vikings visit with and who they bring in for private workouts and that sort of thing. If you see edge rushers there, pay attention to those names, because the Vikings, the past 2 or 3 seasons, some of those guys have always ended up being drafted by the Vikings, or if they haven't been drafted, we've signed them as undrafted rookie free agents. Like Batty is just one example. So Ingram Dawkins got visited privately with the Vikings. They had worked him out in Egan, I believe, last year. They drafted him in the 5th round. So if there's an edge guy, I'm just throwing out a name here, but the Vikings, because they're in the Big 12, they play the Gophers all the time. Derek Moore had a really good Senior Bowl from the University of Michigan. Drew Bunting would love this, that I brought him up. He might be a day 3, 5th rounder. He might go a little bit earlier than that, but he's
Drew's
a guy
having
with
a good day too.
Yes, he is. But he would be, just a name. He's a guy, potential day 3 guy with who was pretty productive at Michigan and also had a strong Senior Bowl. We'll see how things go. Might be a guy the Vikings are interested. I'm sure other teams will be as well. But I think edge draft-wise, that's a day 3 thing for the Vikings, unless somebody really, really drops that they love in the 1st or 2nd round, and they just say, we just got to pick this guy because he's just too good to pass up.
Mm-hmm.
That's your edge stuff. Now for the inside linebackers. Again, Blake Cashman, set in stone to be one of the starters. We all love Blake Cashman. Didn't have as good a year last year, I think, as the year before, but the year before was so good, it was tough to live up to that. The thing that you hope with Cashman is that he's healthy, right? Because he's missed at least 3 games in each of the last 3 seasons where he's been a starter. So availability is an issue with him. And when he is not on the field, the Vikings have suffered defensively with him not being there. So really important that he's healthy, but when he's in there, he's pretty darn good. Eric Wilson is the big decision the Vikings need to make at inside linebacker. I love Eric Wilson. I always did. When he joined the Vikings as an undrafted rookie free agent in 2017, I just loved his game, his energy, how he hits hard. He was phenomenal last year. I don't care what the PFF grades say. This guy was a menace. Teams could not handle him, particularly in pass rush situations. Brian Flores found a way to get targeted him and got him one-on-one with running backs on pass downs, and Wilson frequently obliterated those running backs, just ran through them straight to the quarterback. He just had a great year making plays all over the field when he got to be a starter. They also used him as an edge rusher, which kind of alleviated some of the depth issues at times for the Vikings at edge when they needed to give Turner or Greenard or Van Ginkel a blow. But I was on record a couple of months ago, Dave, where I was like, I don't think I'd be in on signing Wilson again. He turns 32 in September. He's never had a season like he had last year in the NFL ever. So I think my concern is that you sign him, if you re-sign him, I didn't think it was a good gamble. That I didn't think he'd be able to repeat what he did last year again and again if you re-signed him. And you're going to have to sign him for much more cash than you did last year. I don't think, though, I got a feeling that the Vikings and Brian Flores are going to feel much differently than I do about this. So I do see them trying to re-sign him. I think they're going to try pretty hard to get him back. We just got to hope that it's not for too many dollars and not for too many years if they do that. 1 or 2 at a reasonable price, okay, I can live with it. And because was this a career year, Dave, or was this just a case where Brian Flores knew how to use Eric Wilson exactly the way Eric Wilson needs to be used? That's a question that would get answered only if they re-sign him.
True.
Both could be true. Both could be true. We shall see. If you don't bring back Wilson, though, you need to find somebody to replace him. And I think that's going to be in the free agent market. If they do move on from him, who could that be? Again, there's a bunch of potential guys out there. Lloyd from Jacksonville is the belle of the ball right now at that position. The Vikings aren't in on that guy. I think a guy that would be interesting in, and Matt Bowen from ESPN actually identified this player as the best fit if he hits the market, would be Minnesota, is Nakobe Dean from the Eagles. Dean took some time to find his footing in the NFL. His first 2 years, he was highly decorated out of Georgia, but the last 2, he was really found his footing in the Vic Fangio defense, been a starter and a playmaker, phenomenal blitzer, and Brian Flores is going to make use of that. Not the biggest guy, though, right? 5'11", listed at 230, had some injury, has some problems staying on the field. And also, you'd at that size, last year, I hadn't mentioned him yet, but Ivan Pace, right? We have Ivan Pace Jr. He's fallen off the map in Minnesota, was a starter. And then by the midseason, Brian Flores basically was not putting him on the field at all for defensive snaps. Too many missed tackles, pass coverage is so-so at best. Still can blitz really well, but just maybe too one-dimensional of a player for Brian Flores' liking. Dean is similar size player, right? So the whole issues with Ivan Pace about his length, and maybe that's a problem with him tackling and wrapping up. His arms aren't long enough. He's not quite big enough. Dean could have the same issues in the Vikings defense. So there's a fit there. But again, as far as a blitzer goes, he's been really, really good the past 2 seasons. If he's healthy, and he's only 25 years old, so he's young. He's been getting better. He's been a productive starter for a very good defense the past 2 years. I'd be really interested if they don't bring Eric Wilson back, that this would be a guy they'd bring in to replace him. I have also heard Caden Ellis who's with the Falcons the past 3 years as being a target. He's had pretty good past 3 seasons with very good sack rates for an inside linebacker. I'm kind of not seeing it, though, Dave, just because he's 30 right now, so he's only a year younger than Eric Wilson. Coming off 3 pretty good years with the Falcons, I think that he's going to have a strong market and probably cost a bit more than the Vikings would like, particularly at his age. I don't see him coming here. However, Ryan Nielsen, the new defensive line coach, was his defensive coordinator in New Orleans and in Atlanta. And if they have a good relationship, maybe Nielsen really pounds the table to bring in Ellis to Minnesota as a replacement for Eric Wilson. We don't know if that'll happen. Again, I think Ellis is a little bit too old to be signing to this defense when we talked about it needing to get younger. Dean is younger. And I think can be just as good a player, if not better. He would be my preference as far as bringing somebody in to replace Eric Wilson, especially with his blitz capabilities. Draft-wise, again, earlier in the year, I was thinking the Vikings I'd really like to see them draft an inside linebacker early because Eric Wilson, I figured, was a goner. We needed to move on from him, and we needed to get younger on defense, and we needed some young, fresh blood at inside linebacker. Now I'm kind of cooler on that, especially early in the draft, just because what I've been reading is that the inside linebacker draft pool is really top heavy. You've got Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles, both from Ohio State, are like 1-2 at inside linebacker, and Reese is definitely going to go in the top 10, maybe even the top 5, it seems. And Styles might be in the top 10 as well, depending on how the combine goes and all of that. So the Vikings likely aren't going to be in a position to draft either of those guys. And if you don't draft those, then the drop-off appears to be quite steep after those 2, as far as picking somebody in the first late first round or in the second round. CJ Allen from Georgia is one of the top ones. There's Anthony Hill from Texas, who are another. They're kind of undersized guys who likely will go early, but there are some concerns about them because they don't have enough lead in their pants. They're more sideline to sideline speed linebackers, which are not unpopular these days in the NFL. But, I don't know if the Vikings are going in on them like with their second round pick, maybe their thirds, we'd see. But
CJ Allen, like he's got some lead.
Yeah, that's true.
Like
that's
a fire plug.
Yeah, I guess I've also read that because of that, he's tightly packed, that he's not doesn't have those oily hips that they Mike Mayock used to talk about. So again, on the inside linebacker side of things, depth. Like the Vikings don't have much of it. I was surprised that they released Austin Keys, the undrafted rookie free agent, late in the season, because I thought that he had some potential. I thought he was a guy that they could develop and he could become a contributor to the defense maybe in 2027. Instead, they released him, and then the Cardinals picked him up. So he's not even on our practice squad anymore. And beyond him, have you heard of Josh Ross? I don't even know. Like, he's on our roster. I don't feel like I didn't, but not really much of they need depth there. So free agency is a potential to get a starter, but they're going to have to find a way to get some depth there. Again, draft wise, you got 5 picks on day 3. Maybe they look at a flyer there. And this is where Ivan Pace not likely being a restricted free agent. I don't think the Vikings are going to try hard to retain him. He was young. If he had continued on the trajectory that we'd seen in 2023 and even 2024, he'd be a big part of your future at inside linebacker, Dave. But now he's fallen out of favor. I just don't see him even being back. And then even Kobe King, 6th rounder we picked last year, we ended up releasing him late in the season. He was a bust. So the young guys, we just haven't been able to add to that room the way we need to. And the Vikings are going to have to do something about that here, both at edge and at inside linebacker. Again, starting wise, 3 of the 4 positions were looking really good. Got to decide on the Eric Wilson, keep him or replace him. And then depth, we've got to build the depth and get younger and better there.
Well, you talk about building depth, and we haven't been able to keep the young guys. And we talked about it with some of the D-backs and from Lewis Seen, who obviously was a high draft pick, but most of them were lower round picks, and they just don't get developed. They don't have the time. They don't, whatever the reason is, they don't. Mm-hmm. And we need to find a way where they do, because it's necessary to have quality depth. I mean, you can have older guys playing and starting. That's fine. They generally do better. They're older, wiser, all that stuff. But you've got to have quality depth when those guys need breathers or get hurt to come in and give them a break. And we haven't had that. And that has people concerned.
And because of the lack of draft picks that the Vikings had the past 3 seasons, they've dipped heavy into the undrafted rookie free agent pool. And that's been a bit stronger pool than in the past, because you've still got the COVID guys who are older and didn't get drafted. And there's a larger amount of undrafted rookie free agents who had draftable grades that don't get drafted because you can only pick 290 guys or whatever it is, right? But that pool is going to, again, thin out soon too, because the COVID kids are going to be gone, right? So, draft, young depth. We just don't have enough of it. And I think George mentioned, or somebody mentioned about they didn't think Austin Keys was released. I'm 100% sure that he was released. He didn't get poached because he was on the active roster when we released him. I think they were hoping that he would go to
the practice
squad, but the Cardinals had other thoughts there. Mm-hmm. And again, maybe Austin Keys never amounts to anything, but he was a guy that he played a little bit in the regular season game. He got a sack. He was active in preseason. There was something there, I thought. I don't know much about football, but there was something there, I thought, and you didn't need him to start and play a lot right away, but he's not here anymore. So the search continues for guys like him who can become a starter 2 or 3 years down the road, like Eric Wilson was when initially he signed with the Vikings. He was a special teams guy, worked himself after 2 or 3 seasons, worked his way into a starting role by 2020, 2021.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. Well, that ends theme 2. What comes after theme 2?
Theme 3.
And this one is... This week in Vikingsland.
I love that. Long ship moving around, music, yes.
Uh-huh.
Wow. Yeah, well, hasn't been a it's been a well, we'll get to that later, but
thank you again, Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, wow, rainbows and everything.
I know.
Yeah, so NFL Combine is coming up, Dave, and that means that the NFL news cycle, which has been pretty mild lately, is going to pick up big time. And that starts on Thursday with the Underwear Olympics getting on and all the workouts in Indianapolis in the stadium. But Tuesday is media day, and that's going to be where most of the some general managers, some coaches, in some cases, both general managers and coaches from teams, they are going to be hitting the podium in Indianapolis and meeting with the national media and answering questions and saying what they say, except the Vikings. Tyler Forness tweeted out the schedule this week at Indianapolis, and neither Rob Brzezinski, the interim general manager, I think that's the proper term for him, job title for him right now, that Rob Brzezinski isn't on the schedule to be at the podium in Indianapolis, and neither is Kevin O'Connell, which seemed a bit odd. I did learn yesterday that the Vikings say that Brzezinski and O'Connell will talk to Twin City media at one-on-one interviews for any Twin City media that attend the Combine. So that'll be like Seifert, Gessling, Matt Collar, those folks. They are confirmed to do interviews with Paul Allen and Pete Burchett from KFAN. I don't know how hard-hitting the questions are going to be, though, with those guys at KFAN. We shall see. Yeah, softballs away. And I guess the Twin City media will get to ask the hard questions. It's just that we're going to have to wait a while for their stories to come out to see what they asked them. But this is disappointing, Dave, for you and me. I think for a lot of us that they're not going to be at the podium because those videos get posted within minutes, hours after they're done. We all get to watch
live across NFL Network.
Yeah, I'll be at work, so I can't do that. But I could certainly check it out on YouTube a few hours later at the worst. And, Dave, it's unlikely that Kevin O'Connell or Brzezinski are going to say a whole lot of substance at these things, right? But at least it would be one opportunity for us to see if we could read the tea leaves and see what the Vikings got cooking as far as the quarterback situation, or how they're going to build the roster, or how is this old triangle of authority with Flores and Brzezinski and Kevin O'Connell working? How do they see it working? Who's going to make the decisions in the draft and free agency? All that stuff the national media could pepper them with. And that's not going to happen now. And I just find it highly unusual, as you do, and disappointing. And it makes me wonder, and it's odd for Kevin O'Connell, who has never met a Mike he didn't like.
We're not talking about middle linebacker either.
No, like he's very media friendly, right? So I would just wonder, what is the strategy here? Why is this the case? And the only thing I can think of is that the Vikings are trying to minimize O'Connell and Brzezinski's exposure to the Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah questions. Why did he get fired? And I can kind of understand Brzezinski not going to the podium with the national media because he's an interim guy. I actually have never seen him quoted or interviewed in his whole time with the Vikings, which is almost 30 years. I'm sure he has, but I've never seen it.
I think it's only once, and it was, Vikings Entertainment Network type deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he is a salary cap guy. Those guys usually don't do media interviews anyway. That's up to the general manager and the head coach to do those things. But I feel that still, again, it's unusual, and I feel that the Vikings are trying to lessen their exposure because those questions could get sticky for Kevin O'Connell in particular about, like, were you and Kwesi not getting along? Did you was there a power struggle there? Was there tension in the front office? Are you now like the guy who's in charge of player personnel? Did you get the general manager fired? All of those questions could be lobbed at Kevin O'Connell and Brzezinski, and I think they'd be quite uncomfortable answering those. So not having them at the podium alleviates that to some degree, but I think it sucks.
Oh, it does. It does, without a doubt. And I've heard excuses. Well, when they're at the podium, they're facing everybody that wants to come. And you get a lot of lesser reporters come, and I'm not saying they're lesser and not quality, but you get guys from Fans First come and ask questions, and they are very knowledgeable, but you got guys from different parts of the country that don't follow the Vikings that are going to ask either stupid questions or ask questions like you pointed out so who did get Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah fired type stuff? Did you? And all this that they don't want to. Now, when it came out that they're going to be talking to the local media, they'll have I think it's a sit-down breakfast with the local beat reporters. That's where you get Collar and Lewis and all those guys sitting at the table with Kevin O'Connell, and they eat breakfast together and ask questions and do all that sort of stuff. And then, of course, there are these softball questions from Bursich and PA. That'll be separate. But with the beat writers, the Vikings have somewhat control over them. They can go into this saying, these topics are off limits. Mm-hmm. We're not answering these. Sorry. Whether it be Brez or KOC. And literally not do it. And they could threaten or at least implied threaten their access if they do ask those questions. The beat writers are, relying on the good graces of the Vikings to keep their accessibility to them. Yes. And if you say something wrong, you could get shut out. It's happened before. So thank you, Norsefius.
Thanks, Norse.
Never met a Mike he didn't like. I agree. That was a funny line, by the way. But I think it's more of a control the environment thing. They don't want to get out something. They don't want to look bad. No owner or ownership or team ever wants to look bad. It's the whole reason the NFL said no to publicly putting out the team grades, as we discussed last week. Now, of course, we hope they get leaked and we see them, but they don't want to look bad. And right now, the Minnesota Vikings, at the end of the season, and firing Kwesi and all the stuff that happened, look bad. And they don't want to feed into that. Is it good? No, I don't think so. Kevin O'Connell has spoken to all the ones he's been the head coach at. Shit, like we talked last week. Spielman and Zimmer were constantly doing it. It doesn't seem like a big deal to me. It actually increases people across the nation who care follow all those that group up against the podium to see what happens. And then, like I said, it's broadcast on NFL Network, and fans watch. But not this year. They want to control it. They want to shut it down.
So that's what we got for that anyway. Again, disappointing for me, disappointing for you. Is Tyler going to the combine?
He is not.
Yeah.
He spent his money going down to Arizona.
Oh, okay. Well,
he's still down there with the in-laws.
Okay. I'm going to stick with the combine, though. Talked about how, the NFL news cycle is going to heat up because you've got draft prospects, coaches, general managers, agents, the media, all in Indianapolis for a few days, all getting together, looking for scoops, all that sort of stuff, talking about putting together rosters for 2026 and who might go where and for how much, even though they're not allowed to talk about those things. But anyway, they do. So there's going to be so much bullshit flying here over the next few days, Dave. We're thinking we're going to be at a rodeo.
Yep. They go, a lot of the beat writers say they don't even step into the building to watch the players. They're following everybody outside when they're going from to and from in the different pressers, and to see who's coming into the Vikings room for interviews, and then to the pubs and stuff afterwards to find out who's talking to who, who's about to get in a fight sort of deal, and to listen to rumors of, I'll trade you 20 French fries for 14 French fries and this player type deal.
So a lot of rumors are going to be coming out from various media, NFL insiders and whatnot. And like Stefan Diggs once said, there are truth to all rumors, folks. So, and there's going to be some rumors, Dave, that the Vikings fans are going to be wanting to keep a close eye on. As, again, or with all the media being there and agents, there's going to be chatter about who's going where. The quarterback situation and where a quarterback's potentially going to be landing is going to be a big one. You're going to hear about guys like, we'll probably start seeing tweets about what the Cardinals are going to do with Kyler Murray. Are they trying to trade him? Are they going to release him? Where might Murray go? Who's interested in Murray? Same with Derek Carr. Is he going to come out of retirement? And if so, what are his preferred destinations and how much might the Saints get in a return for trading him, because they still have him under contract, even old Kirko Chains, right? We're going to start hearing that. I just saw something from Jason LaCanfora earlier in the week where he wrote about how the Vikings are finding that JJ McCarthy has been difficult to develop, and it's most likely that Kirko is going to end up in Minnesota because he loves it in Minnesota, even though he left for $190 billion to go to Atlanta. He loved it so much in Minnesota, but he took the money and ran. But you're going to start hearing that. So we need to pay attention to those things, and it'll make it for interesting reading. And also it'll give us perhaps a little bit of a sense of who the Vikings are targeting for that quarterback to compete with JJ McCarthy. And in some cases, we might be very disappointed about some of those tweets. Like if there's a lot of tweets about Kirk Cousins definitely coming back to Minnesota, Dave will lose his mind. But another bunch of rumors I'd be watching out for is the Joe Burrow being traded and the Lamar Jackson, the Ravens might trade him. Those rumors really have had no legs since the season ended. We're not hearing anything about that. And we've been heard things where neither team is interested in trading either of those guys. That's probably true. But this week, let's pay attention to see if those rumors start to bubble up and there's a bit of smoke coming out of there, which could mean that the Bengals are actually trying to test the waters to see how much interest, how much of a haul they could get for Joe Burrow, or the Ravens are looking to test the waters and see how much they could get if they traded away Lamar Jackson, or the Burrow's agent and Jackson's agent are actually throwing stuff out there to see if they can kind of coax the Bengals and the Ravens into feeling that they have to trade those guys somewhere else. And if those rumors are out there, Vikings fans will be interested because then the thing will be like the Vikings got to go after these guys. They got to investigate and see, are they investigating? Are they seeing how much it would cost to trade for Joe Burrow or trade for Lamar Jackson? So that's going to be interesting to watch out for. What about Jordan Addison? We talked a month ago, there was a San Francisco 49er beat writer was saying the 49ers are interested or targeting him to trade him. We know Addison's off the field issues. We know that the Vikings have to make a financial decision about him by May 1st, about the 5th-year option and all of that stuff.
And their press, to just like ours or anybody else's, are talking about trading for Justin Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
And no, not going to happen.
No, not going to happen.
But just Jordan Addison, they're also talking about Jordan Addison, and that's more realistic.
Yeah, so that's something to watch out. That's something to watch out for. Do the rumors start percolating about the 49ers are looking heavily into trading for Addison because they need a number 1 wide receiver? Buffalo Bills also need a number 1 wide receiver. Are they looking? And then Kansas City with the latest legal problems with Rashee Rice and the problems they had last year with their wide receivers and not having enough talent there for Pat Mahomes. They're looking for a number 1 wide receiver. I'm thinking, especially if Rice isn't going to be available or they cut him or however it works with the legal stuff that he's going through right now. Addison's name might come up, but the Chiefs are targeting him. So that's another player, another bunch of rumors. Yeah, that's another Addison. Those rumors, Vikings fans should be watching out for that. And one other player, another rumor that I'm interested in is a Maxx Crosby from the Las Vegas Raiders. There was some chatter that the Raiders might be, with them rebuilding, they seem to always be rebuilding, but with them rebuilding, that they might be interested in trading away Maxx Crosby, their Pro Bowl defensive end. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but if you remember last year when Micah Parsons was having his contract issues with the Cowboys, rumors started getting out that the Packers were sniffing around on him and that they might be looking to do a deal with the Packers or with the Cowboys to bring Parsons to Green Bay. And unfortunately, that ended up being true and turning out to be the case. Well, Crosby, again, are the Raiders interested in trading him or not? Apparently, if they are, they want a couple of number 1s, but a couple of the landing spots I've seen for Crosby has been the Bears and the Lions. So we need to be paying attention about the Maxx Crosby trade rumors, and are the Bears and the Lions get mentioned as being in on the chase? And if they are, pay attention to it and also start to be a little concerned, because I don't really want to see Crosby playing for the Bears or the Lions next season. But it's going to be an interesting week, and those are kind of 4 rumors, that types of rumors that Vikings fans, I think, need to be interested in. And maybe there'll be some other ones that pop up that we haven't mentioned.
I'm sure there will be. But yes, those are 4 that we need to track without a doubt and to listen for. And that whole KOC going in front of the entire press, some of those could have come up, but no.
Yeah.
All right. Right now, that was the end of basically Theme 3's planned portion. But thanks, Biggs. Now we go to the unplanned.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday we learned, and I got a call from Tyler because he got a call from Fox, 4? The Fox TV channel reporter is one of his buddies. Rondale Moore was found dead in his home in Indiana. And it's a shame. We didn't know at the time what the cause was. It later came out. Self-inflicted gunshot wound. And for a young kid that came to us, we picked up because Arizona released him. He had a blown knee, and he gets it all healed. He gets back, gets signed by the Vikings. we were sitting there. We had lots of discussion on him, whether he's going to be wide receiver 3 or maybe even 2. And then in the preseason game on a punt return, he blows the other knee.
Yep.
He was in his recovery, as far as we know. He'd talked, one of his best friends talked to him just a few hours before all this happened, but we don't know exactly what happened. Peter says they're still investigating. It was reported as a self-inflicted gunshot wound. But anyways, he was a member of the Minnesota Vikings. Way too young. He's only 25.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody likes seeing it. And yes, Andrew, KOC put out a classy statement, as well as the organization itself. And you can look online, and there's tons of them from everywhere he's been. Purdue, the Cardinals, just absolutely everywhere. And people loved him. He was a bright, young, quiet individual. He had talent. God, boy, a kid could run. And it's just, it's a shame that it happened.
Sure is. And, he wasn't a Viking very long, unfortunately. And he was, when we did these positional looks at the Vikings positions last year at wide receiver, he was a guy I said that I was really interested in the Vikings kicking the tires on. And they did end up signing him. And I was interested because he was a unique player, and he had a skill set that the Vikings didn't have. He was a very, a jitterbug, a guy you could use on jet sweeps, also great run after the catch, and he could return punts and kicks, and we had some openings there. So I thought it was a nice value signing for the Vikings, and unfortunately, first preseason game, second quarter, first punt he returns, he gets tackled. He was out of bounds where the tackle happened, and his knee, his leg did not land the right way on the tackle, and he shredded his left knee. And a little bit too much of this happening. The Cowboys had the same thing with Marshawn Nealand committing suicide as well, and hard to understand when you see the tributes coming out to Moore about like hardworking, humble, loved him. Like, what went on here? But just very unfortunate.
And the NFL Players Association has put out that, hey, call a teammate. We have all sorts of help for you if you need it. The organizations put out all sorts of stuff. If you need help, just reach out. And then the Players Association has said teammates reach out to other teammates. Don't wait on a call. Just reach out. How you doing? It's much the same as with the veteran community. You need to check on your buddies every once in a while. See how they're doing. But it's sad that it happened. And may he rest in peace.
Indeed.
Well. Any last words?
Not at all, Dave. I feel like, but just combine week that'll allow me to put past what happened this morning.
Well, I figure you got a couple more years.
Move on. Yeah. And everybody, fine, let me have it in here. Comments. You've got 4 years to brag.
Well, that's the Olympics. You still have the nationals. But yes. Mm-hmm. I can't wait. It's so fun. To see you guys lose. Oh, it's wonderful. But all right. This week is going to be busy. Tyler does have a show tomorrow night. We're going live. One of the topics will be Rondale Moore. He wants to speak on it, and I don't know what else. I'm sure it's going to be more what's going to happen in the Indy this week, and we'll see. Besides the Indianapolis Hammond Bears, the Hammond Huggables. That looks funny. And on Wednesday, we'll be giving pay grief about that to no end. Trust me.
I'm all for them moving out of Chicago. I think it'd make it a lot easier playing the Bears if they're playing them in Indiana.
Yes. But I think it's great. So, folks, we want you to enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Have a great day. Call a friend that you haven't talked to in a while and just ask how they're doing. And what do we say, buddy?
We say, SKOL Vikings, baby. And thanks for watching.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. And rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcast as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!